Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Red Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Coltin Schachtner-Kramer. Red Effect Podcast is brought to you by REDSTAR. REDSTAR, where our red makes you green. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Red Effect Podcast. Today, we got Tom again. This is probably his 6th or 7th time.
Yeah, where's my award?
Yeah, we're going to have to come up with that. It's on back order.
How do we play this? The eldest gets the mostest?
I guess so. Something like it was a hostess.
The hostess with the mostest. So, and also today we have Ryan Mullenhoff, the owner of REDSTAR. So, great to have him on here. And today we're going to be talking about in-furrow, and specifically we're going to start off with in-furrow fertilizers, and then we're going to move on to different things with what we could do with our in-furrows. But Ryan, one thing that kind of makes us unique is we have our own manufacturing facility. So if you talk about what we can do with that facility and why that really sets us apart.
So having our own manufacturing facility, it puts us in a leadership role. So before we had to get our products from the national companies, and you're bound by what products they have, and you can't really deviate from that. So now we're capable of going, if this farmer A wants to do more zinc, this farmer wants a higher potash, this farmer wants more nitrogen, and we can add biologicals, amino acids, all those different things that we weren't able to do before, quite frankly. So
yeah, it really allows us to plug and play, and you're kind of a mad genius back there, and if they can dream it up, I'm pretty sure you can make it.
absolutely. And being in furrow, that's where it starts. Your seeds are really important, but if we put the right fertility to get that plant off to a good start, the rest of your fertility program, it really amplifies that.
Yeah, and at REDSTAR, obviously being in Nebraska, there's a lot of starter units. So starter fertilizer is really a huge part of our portfolio. So Tom, can you talk about our 3 key products that we put in furrow and just a brief overview of them? We'll get a little bit deeper into them a little bit later.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to start kind of at the base level first and then work our way up. Kind of our base product is All-Star. It's an 823-3. It's nitrogen, it's phosphorus, and it's potassium. Nothing special in it. We just, we take phosphoric acid, react it. We take, KOH, and we make it. From there, we move up to, the next 2 are kind of not like ranked, but these 2 are like pretty equal because they'll go back and forth in our plot work all the time. Maxim Star Plus, which Ryan has sold for a number of years. It's a 1020-2 with 0.14 manganese and 0.13 zinc. And then we have some other things in that actually help improve the uptake of those nutrients. We have things that stimulate soil microbial activity in there, and it just makes the NPK and micros more efficient for that plant as it starts to grow and develop. And then a new one we're launching this year is called Red Elite Plus. And this one's been in the works for a number of years. I started looking at this back in 2016. It's a 043 with 0.14 manganese, 0.13 zinc. But you might think to yourself, boy, 043, that's not near as much as 1020-2. Yeah, you're right. But we're putting some other things in there that are going to help stimulate the soil biology. We got things in there that are going to help that plant, once it starts to grow, it's going to help that plant to kick in its natural defenses and really just start taking off and growing. And the other thing we've noticed with it is it will actually help unlock fertility that's already in your soil. And so it's been a good product for us. The last 3 years in our research, we finally decided, since it beat Maxim Star 3 years, maybe it's time to let our customers have this and play with it.
Yeah, and with that, that's a 3-gallon rate. I don't know if you mentioned that. So it's a 3-gallon rate. So compared to a 5-gallon rate in Maxim Star, that's a very powerful product.
It is. And, we talk a lot about, starter units. Starter units aren't just for starter fertilizer anymore. There's other things that you can put with it. But with both Maxim Star Plus and Red Elite on high fertility ground, they're still working. We're able to give that yield response year in and year out. And it has to do with the things that we're putting with it to give us that starter effect that we really need in our April and May cold springs.
Yeah, and so one other product I'd like you to touch on is our No Star starter. I know we don't do a whole lot of work with that, but it still has a place. Can you explain that one a little bit more?
Yeah. Ryan and I were sitting in his office. I remember it like it was yesterday. And, there's a lot of manure. There's a lot of cattle manure. There's a lot of hog manure around. And guys were like, I'm not sure I want to put a starter on it because I've got all this fertility. And so we're kicking around and say, how do we develop a product that's going to give you the starter effect, but it really doesn't have NP or K in it? And so we kicked around some things. We put some stuff in the plots that year, several different combinations of stuff. And one of them rose to the top. So the next year we're like, okay, let's do this again, because we like to have at least 2 years of success with it. And so we put it in there again, and it worked really well. And so we call it NSS, which stands for No Starter Starter. And, I'll say that was probably developed over 3 or 4 beers one night, but it has worked very, very well in fields where you've got, lots of phosphorus, lots of potassium, and you need to start to unlock it and make it available to that plant.
Definitely. So Ryan, obviously you've been here for 20 years doing this. Can you explain like how the starter business has changed at Red Start in that time to where we are today with all these very unique starters?
Oh, back in the day, we set up planters. I still remember in this very building that we're in, we set up a 12-row Kinsey with a rheostat control and in-furrow tubes. And man, we thought that was a thing back then. But you were selling one starter, no micronutrients. Never talked about that. Never talked about insecticides. Never talked about fungicides and all the other things that you can do there now. So starter fertilizer is just that stepping stone to get into the other things that you can do to help your plant.
Definitely. And unfortunately, where Tom and I are from, we don't have many starter units. My best guess
You
is
should.
we should, yeah. My best guess is somebody's grandpa got upset with one in the 80s. It got taken off and never got put back on. But it needs to make a comeback. And what you just said there is it goes so much further than just a standard starter. But when we're looking at our standard starters, Tom, can you run us through what we saw in the plot this year with our, let's call it Maximum Star and Red Elite, our 2 main starters?
Yeah. This is the first year in 9 years that Red Elite Plus hasn't beat a Maximum Star type product, which that's fine. It was only 2 bushels less, but it still performed extremely well. I think it was 6 or 7 bushels better than the check and a couple bushels below Maximum Star Plus. But what it offers and what it brings to the table, especially with everything around soil health, Red Elite is really built to improve your soil health in that zone where you plant that seed, so it can actually get off to the best start possible.
I'd also like to point out on Maxim Star and Red Elite in our plot, it is a high fertility plot.
Yeah.
Still seeing about 8-9 bushel positive experience on a 95 parts per million phosphate. So that's
Yeah,
pretty incredible.
it is. I think we looked at the other day, we were talking, kind of going through it, and like, you realize this is corn on corn on corn on corn where we're doing our plot work. And it should be on, bean stubble going to corn. And then we looked at the RX 360, we're like, oh my gosh, the average is 94 parts per million of phosphorus and 458 or 70 parts per million of potassium. And it's like, wow, to get those kind of responses is really outside of the statistical analysis that you'll see from universities.
So I think that kind of goes back to when we first started and we were just doing starter back then. Well, if you look at Maxim Star Plus and you look at Red Elite Plus, it's not just starter. There's the other things in there, and we're getting positive yield results versus that. So when you go look at the other people selling your 624 6s, whatever, 1034-0, and we're increasing yield on a high fertility piece of ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like we're putting it out where it's a 10 part per million phosphorus and saying, hey, look at this. No, it is.
You can not put anything in the furrow in 10 parts per million and it'll work.
Yeah, it'll work great.
Yeah. And it's, starters are still the most efficient way to get your nutrients because you're banding them.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting them right next to the seed. You're putting them right where that root system develops. So the minute that seed starts to germ and build its root system, it's got the fertilizer right there that it needs.
Mm-hmm. And one unique part about Red Elite Plus is the no heavy metals. And I believe that plays a lot bigger role than we want to think. Even though you figure there's only a couple part per million of heavy metals in there, it still has to have an effect.
I think the salt too. Like
Yeah.
that basically virtually no salt
Mm-hmm.
is pretty big.
Yeah.
I agree that to me, that's how you can take a 043 and get it to yield right with a 1020-2 or a 624-6, because very, very low salt. Can't say no salt, but almost, and no heavy metals. To me, that's the key. It's quality.
Yeah.
Put it
And
on
that's what I
soybeans.
mean.
Yeah.
Singulate your soybean. You can't get much better.
Definitely. So this year in the plot, we like to try a lot of crazy different things. And one of the things we did was add zinc to our Red Elite. So Tom, I know we were in 2 different rates. You want to just touch on those?
We did. So we've got a decent amount of zinc that's within Maximum Star Plus and Red Elite Plus. However, when we start to look at the P to Z, 10 parts phosphorus, 1 part zinc, a lot of the soil tests we get back, we might have good phosphorus levels, but our zinc is lagging behind. And so, Colton, we talked about, hey, what can we do to bump this up? And so what we did is we added enough zinc to get to a quart of zinc, and then we went, to the 2-quart level, and you could really see the yields bump up on those. Now, where we added it and got it to 32 ounces an acre, which is a full quarter pound of zinc. From an ROI standpoint, that one was still a really good ROI. When we went the next level on the 2 quarts of zinc, just shy of paying for that extra quart of zinc. However, again, we're back to the fertility in that situation. Our zinc levels are very good on that farm.
Mhm.
So it's going to be interesting next year as we kind of do that again on a farm that's maybe, so I call it average fertility, not so high.
Yeah, and that's one unique thing that we look at a lot of soil samples, and our P to zinc ratios are oftentimes nowhere close to that 10 to 1, especially if you're in a long-term manure situation. You can have a very good zinc level for everybody else, but your phosphorus level is just so high, you still need to supplement it. And Tom, we talk about this a lot. We really believe, especially on corn, if you can start to add zinc to your starters, you're going to really like what you're seeing.
Absolutely. A 250 bushel corn crop needs a half a pound of zinc, and every quart of zinc 9% EDTA has a quarter pound of zinc. So you put 2 quarts in, that should cover you for a 250 bushel corn crop. Okay. Now, the reason I think that quart works so well is because we have zinc in our soil. Okay. Maybe not enough, but it's there. And so it's right by the roots. The plant can take it. And to me, it maximizes the phosphorus uptake as well.
Absolutely. So moving on to different add-on products. One maybe we're probably not putting in with Red Elite, but this product, Nova Star, it's kind of our go anywhere, anytime product. Can you touch on what we've seen results-wise In-furrow out of that product?
Yeah. Nova Star is an amino acid polypeptide. It actually comes out of Europe, which I believe is kind of unique. And what makes Nova Star set apart from a lot of the other products in the market that might be 100% soybean based is ours is made up of both monocot and dicot crops that go into it. It's 100% plant vegetal based, but we have seen some tremendous results in furrow where we're putting that with, like a Maxim Star Plus. And it's just sort of helped taking it to the next level. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that not only are we helping to feed the soil microbiome, the fungi and the bacteria in the soil, but I think it's also helping to be an energy source for that plant. So in those cold, wet conditions when it germinates, when we get down into the 30s or 40s, it's a good food and energy source for that plant. And I think that's what's taken us through.
Yeah, especially when you consider amino acids are one step away from being protein.
Yes.
Especially early in that plant's life. That's very important to have in there. So, Ryan, what are some, I know you like fulvics. Can you explain how you got onto fulvics and why you feel they're really the right fit for adding to our starters if they don't already have them in it?
Well, I probably shouldn't say this, but humics are dirty black, and I just didn't like staying in the guy's planter. So fulvic was your next best choice back then. So fulvic is just more or less a refined version of a humic. It's cleaner, and it works with the all your other fertilizers. It mixes well. It doesn't stain anything. But what you see from the plant is better uptake. It makes your nutrients available that are in your soil already, and it consistently we've seen a 5-10 bushel increase on just fulvic alone. So
Yeah, for a product that really does not cost that much in the grand scheme of things, seeing that response is very impressive.
yeah, and that's the reason why way back even before when I started with 10, 20, and 2, we put fulvic in way back then. And back then I probably didn't even know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
It worked. So
It really does. REDSTAR fulvic is, from an ROI basis, for the little bit of money that it costs, you're getting a big response from it. And I think that's one of the key drivers that makes Maximum Star Plus what it is today.
Yeah, and one thing that we've talked about on soybeans specifically is calcium. Now, calcium in-furrow, for everybody at home, do not mix it with phosphorus. You'll get concrete. It happens almost instantly. We don't want the phone calls like, "Hey, I forgot to clean out the tank and now it's concrete." But what we've been seeing from the plots is calcium in-furrow on soybeans does show a good response.
Yeah, and you can mix calcium 3% EDTA, but it has to be EDTA. Okay, and it has to be 100% EDTA. It can't be a citric EDTA blend, or you'll make buzzard puke and you'll just make everybody mad. But yeah, in corn and in-furrow corn and in-furrow soybeans, yes, the last 2 years we've seen some nice results with calcium, and you're talking about 16 to 32 ounces in furrow. And what gets me, Colton, is the fact that we go to the soil test and look at it and we're like, wow, we have all this calcium there, and we can see a response from 3% calcium EDTA.
It just goes back to why we like the Haney so much. Is our standard test. I mean, you can have 6,000 part per million calcium, but how much of that is actually available?
Right.
And that's one thing I would suggest to everybody at home. When you're looking at your starter package, maybe go out and take a Haney. And so you can discover some of these different things in order to understand, like, do I need these products?
Yeah, absolutely. And, on calcium, it's kind of the driver, it's kind of the truck that it tells all the other nutrients that what you can go and do. And it's unfortunately considered a secondary nutrient, and it gets overlooked way too much simply because of what you just said. It's on the soil test, but the plant can't pull it.
Yes. Yeah, it has to be in the right form. So moving on from those micronutrients, another one that I believe has a big play is manganese. Obviously, manganese is one that helps with our germ. And that's something that we see on the test. We go, yep, it's there, and move on. So can you talk about why it's important that we have that in our products and why we do put it in our REDSTAR products?
I mean, I think it's, from my perspective, it's self-explanatory why Ryan's been putting it in there, because I can improve the germ of that plant. So you look at Maximum Star Plus, it's actually got a little more manganese than it does zinc, and it's actually in the right ratio that Ryan's been putting it in there, and it's just going to help that plant to be more efficient, right? I mean, as it imbibes the water, it starts to germinate. Manganese is just critical with zinc at that point in time. And, one of the things too that kind of gets overlooked a little bit is it also helps with nitrogen efficiency of that young soybean plant or corn plant.
Yeah, definitely. So moving off of nutrients, obviously there's more than one way to skin that cat, and we probably have yield result from it in our plots about everything we could imagine, and everything we could imagine next year we'll have there. One of the nice parts about REDSTAR is the amount of testing we do and some of the crazy ideas we throw out there just to see. So moving on, one thing this year that we wanted to see was an in-furrow fungicide plot. And we put that out there, and it was tremendous yield results. We do have our RX360 data, so we could tell in that field it was very high fusarium. In fact, they said it was probably the highest fusarium field they'd ever seen. And one unique
I'd be
thing-
good at something.
Could be good at something. That's right. And one thing we saw when we went out and sampled that plot in order to look at the effectiveness is you could tell to the line where that jib started based on our trials because they started to have more jib. But so when we go look at that, Tom, can you tell us about the top 4 products in that trial and what that means to a grower who would want to use them?
Yeah, a little background on that. 10, 12 years ago, it was kind of getting to be a little bit of a practice, and then all of a sudden, it just kind of went away. But one of our suppliers that makes a couple of products that mix with fertilizer said, "Hey, want you to put this in furrow." And John Person has actually been on this thing big time.
Yep.
The last 3 years. Finally, Ryan and I said, "Okay, we'll put it in the plot." And so I think we had 10 different products, 12 different treatments. We had a couple of them in there twice, looking at different rate ranges. The worst performing fungicide was 10 bushels better than the untreated check. Okay. The top 4 were 25 to 26 and a quarter bushels better than the untreated check. Now, we did not have starter fertilizer in here. This was just a fungicide in-furrow plot that we wanted to really take a look at. And I don't know whether I should say fortunately, mostly unfortunately, we had a lot of stock rot this year. I mean, it affected me personally. It affected a lot of our customers. There was a lot of farms where, parts of fields were dead in August, and it was because of stock rot. I mean, you and John, highlighted that on the plot. We highlighted it here at our plot day in Lee. And so it was really well timed to have an in-furrow fungicide trial. I don't think we knew it was going to happen like this, but I think it just goes back. And Colton, today on the trip over here, you were driving and I was going back and looking at stuff from 2012 and 13 at the universities. And, they were just doing headline EC at that time, and they were seeing anywhere from 15 to 22 bushels. And that would match up exactly with what we saw.
Yeah. So what you're saying is growers need to seriously take a look.
Yeah, and I think, the RX 360 that Ryan has developed for us really shows that with that DNA analysis. I mean, when you did your farm this spring, and we got that back, and we're like, what do you mean we've got that in there? And our plots were already planted. By the time that was done, the plots were already planted, and it was like, wow, we're seeing this kind of disease in the soil. Lo and behold, look what happened in our area this year.
I guess I'm a machinery guy when it comes down to it. When you look at the RX 360 where we can DNA it, and we can get it down to and turn the dosage on this side of the field and not put it on here, but that's what we get back to of the starter being the stepping stone. We have to have the placement in the furrow, then we can put the fungicide on when we need it, what field we need it. We can do insecticides on which fields that we need. So yeah, sky's the limit.
I mean, you're really making a case for, let's say I've got a lot of cattle manure and I got high fertility.
Yeah.
I don't think I need a starter. Well, I think you need a starter system on your planter because you need insecticide with all the rootworm and variant rootworm issues. Now with what we're seeing with fungicide type things. And then we've got things like, Novastar, things like REDSTAR Fulvic, NSS, things like that we can put in there to actually help your plant take advantage of that fertility and never put an MPK product in that planter.
Honestly, Tom, like years ago, starter was like 5, 10, 20 gallons an acre.
It was.
Now we're talking about ounces.
Yeah.
Ounces to 5 gallons. So it's just completely, it's just a complete change in the market.
Yeah. And again, the technology is to the point where it's allowing us to do these. And honestly, you can take that next step in yield because we can protect that seedling, or we can, enhance that seedling growth from early on. If you don't have a starter row kit on your planter, you really can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest point is you can't place something in furrow if you don't have the in-furrow
Right.
kit. And really, you don't have to go out and buy the most fancy one from John Deere. That, I don't know, what is that? It's $30,000, $40,000 to put on. You can get it a very affordable one, and it'll do everything you want. It won't be that fancy. You won't impress the neighbors. But when your corn's out yielding theirs, that's where it's at.
Absolutely.
Yes, we can assist with that if the grower so chooses. So there's different options that are available. You can spend as little or as much as you want. So,
And that's just another tool in our belt that we in fact have the ability to get our growers.
your national company is not, they're not going to do that. So
Yeah.
we want to help you. We want to make it as easy as possible for you guys to do it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's all about yield preservation. And you hear, the Hulas and the Dowdies, talking about that yield preservation. They all have in-furrow systems on their planter.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. And then Ryan, so going back to that fungicide plot, when you harvested that, could you see the difference we were going through the field?
Absolutely. Especially like on the yield map, and everyone says yield maps, like you can't see it on there. Well, I think I had the breaks on that 5 to 8 bushel per acre on the colors, and you could literally see it when you hit it. So it was, and this is an irrigated plot where the fungicide was, so it's not like it's 180 bushel corn either. So this is good corn.
Yes.
And I can speak from experience walking that plot. Amongst the treatments, it was hard to tell when you changed, except for your count in rows. But as soon as you got 2 rows outside that treatment, it was a night and day difference.
Yeah, I want to point one thing. I had one product in that plot, in that trial, in the fungicide trial, that wasn't a fungicide, and it was an in-furrow nematode product, and we saw a little over 7 bushels with that one. No fungus at all. And what's interesting is we go back and look at the RX 360. There's some nematode pressure there as well. So again, just lucked out that we put that in the plot. Just wanted to see it, because there's some products, I think Syngenta or BSF have developed some seed treatments that are nematode type things, and we're like, well, let's just see what it looks like, and 7+ bushel.
Yeah, definitely, and especially in Iowa, looking at the RA 360 for the ones we're getting back there. I mean, the soybean cyst nematodes are off the chart. They can't even populate enough numbers for what they're finding on the little map. So it tells you just how bad it is. So that's going to be a product that we have to look at in order to control that.
Absolutely.
Because yes, there are some genetics that help with that, but there's nothing bulletproof yet.
Right. And where we're from in Iowa, it's pretty big issue.
Yeah, it's not a question of if you have them, it's how many do you have.
Yep.
And then moving right along with that kind of plays into the next part, which is insecticides. So traditionally, In-furrow, obviously a bifenthrin with liquid fertilizer compatible, is our go-to. And one thing we've been trying in some of our plots is a product called Nerisma. And Nerisma, for those at home, it's a 1.1 ounce rate, so extremely low rate. To my knowledge, it's a pretty new mode of action. And then in addition to that, instead of having a poison or a danger label, it's a caution label. So it's a little bit safer for us too. Obviously, don't drink it, but touching it's not going to make your tongue go numb like some bifenthrin will. So can you talk a little bit, because we've been using that for a couple of years, can you talk a little bit about what we've been seeing out of that?
Yeah. Actually, I was talking to a friend of mine in Iowa in 23, and it was March or April, and he was telling me about how they had this new insecticide from BSF that they're putting in furrow because they've got a lot of the variant rootworm in north central and northeast Iowa. And I'm like, what's the name of it? And so he's like, Nerisma. And I'm like, well, I'm German, so I could kind of remember that name. And so then I called our BSF rep here in Nebraska about it. Never heard of it. And come to find out, it was all registered, EPA registered, but they'd only launched it in basically the eastern half of Iowa and Illinois where the variant rootworm was. So I called the tech rep in Iowa that I've known for a long time, and he got us some. And then, Ryan, we went and bought some, and we put it on several of our customers, farms who've had 20+ year corn on corn. And it's so hard to get dries out here because we've got starter systems on there. And the Capture LFR type products are okay, but the rates have had to keep going up, and the control wasn't what it probably should be versus the dry. Well, anyway, we tested it on Ryan, 3 or 4 customers, and
this is, like you said, they're 20 years corn on corn. We were running 16 ounces of Capture on the one guy. The other guy was running Force CS system, and the other guy was, I believe, dry or something. And you couldn't have higher populations.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyway, when we harvested them, it came back and it actually won the plot. And then I was talking with Mark Store over in Iowa, and they had a lot of the same things versus dry, where they were the same as or beating dry. And so now I've got a product that's got a caution label. It's got a very low use rate, 1.1 ounces, and it's doing the job on rootworm. I think after that, we were pretty well sold on it, and I think we sold a fair amount of it in 2024.
And like we were talking before, the dosage recipe is simple. You don't mix it. It's just dump it in.
Yes.
And it's almost your whole day of,
Yeah.
planting stuff.
Yeah, especially that low of a rate.
Yeah.
And it's very important to point out that not only was it standing toe to toe with a dry, it was
beating the dry.
which is extremely, extremely hard to do with insecticides.
Absolutely.
And one nice part about that too is that new product coming on. I mean, there's areas around where obviously bifenthrin doesn't work. Some guys are having to add dry systems with bifenthrin and a triple stack corn and still having problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a really good rootworm material. However, from a secondary pest standpoint, it really doesn't do much for secondary pests. So we're still actually doing some capture LFR along with it, just in those situations where secondary pests are a concern. So I want to make sure to point that out so everybody knows that it's a rootworm only product in Nerisma.
That's good to know. So is there any other products that you guys see coming down the line through REDSTAR that we really need to pay attention to that are going to be big?
Red Shield. As we look at the in-furrow data that we went through last week, Red Shield in both corn and soybeans seem to really stand out. We actually had that in the fungicide plot just as a fertilizer option in that plot, and it actually did pretty well. And so I was sort of surprised at that. But it's a complementary product, that we'll put with Maximum Star Plus, and we'll put with Red Elite Plus, just for folks who need, some additional micronutrients, 1% boron, 1% zinc, 1% manganese, and it's heavy in potash. So, excuse me, those two things are going to be really key to make that product work with other products.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, with what I've been seeing out of Red Shield, both in-furrow and foliar. That's a product we really need to consider going forward for all of our growers.
Yep, and it's powered by Novastar. I
Yes.
mean, we've got Novastar that we've built into that blend, and that's, I think, a lot of the driving force behind it.
Definitely. So Ryan, what's one product you think that everybody should use?
All of them.
All of them? Well, can't use all of them.
Oh boy. Like I said, or Tom said, Red Shield is probably one of my favorites. If we're talking about in-furrow stuff, that's the one that I've seen the most success with in-furrow. I personally love the combination of Red Elite Plus and Maximum Star Plus together. I think that gives kind of a cool combination.
Are you doing like 3 gallons of Red Elite and 2 gallons of Maxim, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that'd probably be my go-to. Then other than just your standard other, just different rates and stuff. So yeah.
Perfect. And
What about you?
Well,
Well, you're from Iowa. You don't care.
yeah, so in-furrow, I'm definitely really excited from what I've been seeing out of Red Elite Plus. Tom and I were talking the other day, we were going through the data, and we're like, damn, we forgot to put Red Shield with Red Elite Plus.
Did.
And it's like, okay, well, next year we're going to have to run some omission plots to get all that data figured out. Because I feel as if the fungicide plots had that big of a response and Red Shield by itself, I would have loved to see it with Red Elite in that same field.
I would have too.
Yeah, that's been really good. But those are my products I really like. Is Red Elite Plus. It's well-rounded. It checks all the boxes. And it's a stud. And it has been for several years. It's easy to win once. But when you can consistently do it, that's saying something. It's just what we've seen out of Red Shield. Adding that to it, I feel as if is a really, really good option.
We've put together a pretty good complement of products for in-furrow that sometimes it can kind of be hard to say which ones do I use. But I think
You don't have to pick just one.
that's right, you don't. And I think that's also with what RX360 is going to do. And I hope that, all of our customers and all of our dealers really get a chance here over the winter to take a look at our RX360, and take a look at the results that we have. And then you start to identify things that honestly we've been guessing on. We've been guessing on rootworm. You look at the fungus in the soil, we're relying on corn seed treatments and soybean seed treatments to help protect that. In some of these cases, there's so much disease there where that seed treatment's not enough. We have to look at some other options. And I think that's why the in-furrow fungicide thing was so big on corn. I think we need to expand it to soybeans in-furrow next year.
Absolutely. And when we look at like diseases like Fusarium and Gibberella, those cannot be controlled through a foliar application. Those have to be controlled through the soil. So if you take a test and it's coming back like Ryan's where it's all red, then it's like, okay, I don't have a starter, but it's something I should seriously consider, because while the seed treatment does help, at what point does it get overrun?
Absolutely. At a certain growth stage of that corn, the seed treatment's done. And I can't remember, is it V2 or V3? I'd have to ask John for sure, but it's in that neighborhood.
Yeah. So moral of the story is, if you don't have a starter unit, really, really want to consider it. And once you get that, we can really help you decide what you want to put on, when you want to do it, or if you need it, don't need it. And like everything at REDSTAR, everything's 100% customizable.
And Colin, people got to remember, it's not about spending more money.
No.
So if your starter program's this, let's just move some things around. Let's be more efficient and spend our dollars where we need to.
Well, that's a great point, Ryan, because if we're running, say, 5 gallons of 1034O on your farm with insanely high phosphorus levels, that's probably not the best way we can spend that money. Let's reallocate that and spend it on something else.
Yeah, you look at dry spreading, and we do a lot of dry spreading too, okay? But when you're dry spreading, 20 to 30% of that's going to be available for that next year's crop. But when I put, Maximum Star Plus in-furrow, 100% of that fertilizer is going to be available to that corn or that soybean plant when it starts to grow and germinate and grow.
Definitely. All righty, guys. Well, thanks for coming on. If anybody has any questions, redstarne.com. You can get a hold of any of us.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks.
We'll see ya.